This morning, we're talking about the next part of chapter 5. We began last week with leaders, and today we're talking about caring for one another in the body of Christ. We're in 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 14 and 15. Now, before we were born again, we were very self-focused. We only cared about self. We focused on self. It was all about us, me, mine. After we're born again, we need to learn how to be other-focused. We need to learn how to lessen us and elevate our neighbor. In fact, if we look at the world around us who aren't born again, we see a world of violence, of evil, of backbiting and lying and cheating and stealing and murder, all kinds of stuff that is out there that is not glorifying to God. In Ephesians, the 4th chapter, verse 23 through 25, it says this, "And that you be renewed in the spirit of your mind and put on the new self." And so putting on something means we have to take off something. We do that all the time when we're out working and we get real sweaty. We go inside, take off the old clothes, get a shower, put on new clothes. That's the picture here. Can you imagine if you went outside and you got all sweaty and you had to get to some important event that you had to dress up for and you came rushing in, you're all sweaty, you don't have time to change, so you don't even take off your old clothes, you put on the new ones over it. Wouldn't be a good thing ultimately, would it? And so we need to understand that in the Christian life, we need to take off those old sweaty clothes, that old life, that old selfish way, and begin to put on the new self. You see, the principle that's really behind all of this is loving our neighbor as ourselves. We need to care about others around us. And I think the lesson is this: groups succeed when they help each other succeed. Groups succeed when they don't demand their own ways, but they help all of the others in that continue to grow up little by little. In sports, we call it chemistry. If the chemistry is there on the team and they're all excited about it, then they're all working together to make sure that everyone is growing and getting better so that they can be better as a team. Organizations. When somebody feels or is treated as an inferior, they don't work as hard. They don't do as much. Groups succeed when you help them succeed. Even organizations succeed when all of the people of that organization are helping all the other ones succeed. I used to go to school with my father, and from time to time, and he was a band director, and so he'd need the janitors to set up the stage and the like. And he got along fabulously with them. In fact, often I would be there in the summer months or on a holiday when I was off and he went into school to get some things lined up. And we'd go down during what he knew was break time. It was the boiler room, but it was also their break room for the janitors. And he would just sit down with them and chat with them and have a good time with them. And he got to know them really well. And they would do anything for my father because that's how organizations work. And even in the church, as we journey into eternity one day, and we look to be in heaven with each other for all eternity, when we journey towards becoming Christ-like, we need one another. Now, we understand the process, you've probably heard it a lot of times before, of coming into the family of God. We know that Romans 3:23 says, "For all have sinned." That means every one of us, none of us are exempt. And we know in Romans 6 that it says, the wages of that sin is death, which means eternal separation from God. That's what we're owed because we're all sinners. And then it says in Romans 10:9 that if we confess with our mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in our heart that God has raised him from the dead, we shall be saved. That's a surrendering to what he did for us. That's admitting our need of him. That's our step of commitment and subjecting ourselves under him or becoming a follower of his. And when we do that, it says in Ephesians 8:9, "For by grace," something I don't deserve. For by grace are you saved through faith, my belief, my acceptance of what he did for me. And it says it's without works, so that no one can boast. And today we're going to have later on, won't see it on the video here, but later on we're going to have, after we're done the majority of our service, a baptism outside on the grounds. And those people who are being baptized will need us, all of us, coming alongside of them, admonishing them when that is needed, encouraging them, helping them, and being patient with them so that they can grow up into Christ likeness. Now, whenever you get a new job, you know that it's so much easier to learn that new job, that new task, that new hobby when we learn from somebody that's an expert in it. And so when an expert comes alongside of us, for instance, I wanted to learn how to fly fish. And as I was learning how to fly fish, I asked my uncle if he would teach me, because he was an accomplished fly fisherman. And so he took me into the backyard and actually took 2 other neighbor boys with us, and all 3 of us learned how to fly fish. And when I'd go out in the boat with him, he'd make a few suggestions along the way. I'd ask him a few questions, and he taught me how to get better because that expert was there. That ought to be going on in the church. We ought to be helping one another. We ought to be encouraging one another. We ought to be patient with one another. And sometimes we even need to admonish, which means to warn one another when we're going astray. As people join us on the journey to heaven, we need to remember these key points from our passage today. Let me read it for you. In 1 Thessalonians 5:14 and 15. We urge you, brethren, admonish the unruly, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with everyone. See that no one repays with evil for evil, but always seek after that which is good for one another and for all people. And so he's telling us several things that are really important in the Christian life. And we learned last week how to deal with leaders, those who were doing the work of leadership, that they weren't better than us, but that we needed to relate to them properly. Today, it's all of us together, one another. All of us. And the first thing he said is admonish, which means warn. Warn the unruly. In Thessalonica, many of the people were dropping out of work and just relying on the rest of the Christian community to take care of them because they believed that the rapture was coming almost imminently, immediately. They thought it was going to be any day. And he said, warn those because they're not living properly. If you don't work, you don't eat is a biblical principle. We need to understand that we need to do it God's way and not just let everybody else take care of us. The second thing he said was encourage. Be literally a cheerleader to the other people around you. That's what it means to encourage, to be a cheerleader, to build them up, to encourage them. A mentor, a spouse, friend, anyone can be an encourager. Encourage the faint-hearted who think less of themselves than they ought to think, who think they don't measure up, who just aren't confident that they could be like you. I've had many people that I've talked to on various issues and about teaching or preaching, and they just don't feel like they can live up to other preachers or teachers. And I just inform them, look, just be yourself. You're good enough. You've got what it takes. You just need the confidence. And we encourage and build up that way. Warn the unruly, encourage the faint-hearted. Thirdly, help the weak. We need to help those who are weak in their faith, who are struggling, who need to be encouraged to get into more prayer time, more Bible time, who need to go a little deeper in their faith. We need to help them. We need to come alongside them. We need to maybe walk with them and become a discipler for them or with them. And then it says, and be patient. Not everyone's is going to mature at the same rate. Not everyone has the same spiritual IQ as you do, or maybe I do, or maybe somebody else does. And so we need to be patient with them. Now, it's hard to be patient if you're like me. I'm a little bit driven. I'm a little bit, I just don't like to rest. I don't like to sit around doing nothing. It's hard to be patient. I want to be in motion all the time. And the other day I was driving down the road Somebody got very impatient with me. I was only driving a mile or two over the speed limit, and then I started put on my blinker and I started slowing down to make a right-hand turn. They wanted me to pull all the way off the road to make it. I knew that that was not what the law says to do. There's a solid white line there. I shouldn't pull over that solid white line. But they got so close to the rear end, I don't know if they were looking on their cell phone or what and just looked up, but all of a sudden they're pounding on their horn. I mean, they were impatient. We need to be patient with one another. It's hard to be patient. Today, we have several people who are being baptized. They are demonstrating to those who will view it the reality of their inner faith. And they will go in and connect themselves with all the body of believers that have been baptized into Jesus Christ. It's a symbol of dying to self, going under the water, and coming up to newness of life. They're demonstrating their faith. But along the way, they will need others to come alongside them and encourage them, sometimes warn them, help them, and be patient with them so that they might grow up into Christ-likeness. We need to each do our part if we want to succeed as a ministry, both individually and corporately. So the question I ask you today is, do you love one another? Will you help each other mature in their faith? Will you be patient with them? Will you help them? Will you encourage them? And at times, if need be, will you admonish them, warn them, so that they might walk in the ways of the Lord? Think about that, won't you? And let's all help each other grow to be Christ-like.